Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Morning Magazine for this July 30th, 2019. In part two, we are going to be joined by Stephanie and Donna from Wisconsin Vesta Dog Fundraiser. Looking forward to talking with them. Right now, we have in with us Mayor Zach Vruwink. And Mayor, good morning to you.
Good morning, James.
We also want to say hello to Kevin from Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Hello, Kevin there. Now, Mayor, I understand how busy you've got to be right now, so really cannot thank you enough for the time. And for those behind the scenes looking a little bit here, we scheduled this a little later than we usually do when we meet with you. So I really can't thank you enough for coming in today and talking with us. And first thing I want to ask is how you and your family are doing.
Doing fine.
Yeah.
Fortunately,
You guys all right
many family members did not have damage or have issues following last week's storm.
Good.
But personally, I can't say the same about my house.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's brought us all together for certain. That we almost everybody has some kind of damage or something going on. And that's certainly the headline today is the storm and some kind of updating some information about that. Right. So I understand that you have some information for us about that and the updates of how things are going and progressing along.
Sure. Well, it's been an interesting week and a half already in the city, and I think even around the state, hearing how other communities have fared or fared less or fared worse maybe than what we experienced here in the city. From a storm event, it was very unique because, think back to that Saturday morning, a little over a week ago, where we got word that there were storms approaching the city, and obviously the water ski show tournament was happening out at Lake Wazeecha, so very concerned about health, safety, and welfare of those folks. And we really can't thank the county, the sheriff's department, and all the folks involved out at the water ski show, really making sure folks got the notice, whether they're at the campground or whether at the festival grounds, because that really could have been a disaster from public injury and public safety situation. So I'm glad that folks heeded the warnings to take shelter, not risk it, but the rest, from that moment, I can remember when the storm was approaching us. We came through the city, and I hadn't left because I wasn't sure. Okay, like everyone else, we want to shelter down, shelter in place. When the radar seemed to clear up, it was an opportunity to get out. Leave the house and really drive throughout the city, and it wasn't even one block in either direction. There were trees down in my street. Unfortunately, I was able to hop a curb and get around them. In a quick survey, I contacted city staff, public safety staff, and public works to say, okay, what's your assessment from where you are, knowing that I wasn't able to get around to the entire city within a matter of minutes. So it was really encouraging to have city staff come together. We assembled at City Hall by 11:30 that morning after the storm, to put together a strategy and a game plan on how we were going to address the public safety and public health situations in the community. First concern was gas mains and gas services. When trees get uprooted, they take a lot of infrastructure with it in some cases, and so we had gas leaks on the city's east side, and so we were staying in close contact with We Energies. Our firefighters and paramedics came in and evacuated a number of homes to ensure that people wouldn't be in immediate risk or danger of a catastrophe, really, if it were to get that far with our gas services. So that was the immediate concern. Obviously, planning on how we were going to open up streets again and what equipment and what staff we had to call in, but I really can't thank city staff enough for responding very positively to the call that public works guys came in full force. Obviously, our police and fire folks that were on duty were there, but those that had to respond to the call. Interestingly, a few of my department heads were out of town. I happened to be in town, and I think I was very thankful that I didn't make a decision to go up to the north to the family cabin or something. Thought about it, but when I saw the forecast, I thought, there's probably not any reason for me to be anywhere else but home. And, so it was really all hands on deck for days. I mean, not just hours and consuming all of us that weekend. It lingered in every day last week. I mean, it was just to the point where, come come yesterday or even on Sunday, I was like, I'm ready to take off the emergency manager, emergency responder hat and put on the mayor hat again and, continue to work on the stuff that we had been planning to work on last week, despite the activities that came before us.
Kudos to all of you guys for being able to collaborate so quickly and on a Saturday, nonetheless. But also more to the point, you said something there that stood out to me about coming up with a game plan. Mm-hmm. And for those, I think anybody in the area here understands this, but I think outside of the area it may be a little different for that. There is no playbook for something like this. Right. We haven't experienced something like this. You as a mayor haven't. We as citizens haven't. We've had plenty of storms. Tornadoes have touched down here before. Mm-hmm. Nothing like this before on this level. Right. So coming up with that game plan has to be pretty difficult in the beginning steps, and I would think in the beginning steps. So for it to come together so quickly was great, but you don't really, when it comes to something like this happening, you don't really have anybody else to kind of ask, well, how did you do this? How did you do it? Because there's no comparison to something like this. So when it comes to that, getting any advice or knowing where to even start, is it something that where you brought your people in and your cabinet, if you will, kind of came together, as you said, and came up with that game plan, or was it something that you were reaching out to people for?
Good question. So you're right. Prior to being mayor, I never had any past experience. Sure, the only training that I've had as mayor is one, you go to conferences and seminars, workshops where the city that just experienced the most recent catastrophe or disaster is the speaker, right? And they're talking about their process and how they've gone about it. So I've had experience and exposure with those sort of convenings. But we do have at local government, there's NIM, or government in general, there's NIMS training, which is essentially different levels of disaster preparedness and disaster response. And fortunately, I had taken a couple of those trainings. They're not the most exciting, but you never want to be the person that experiences it or has to put that in practice. But it was good exposure, and I know all of our staff are trained. I know we've got to continue to do refreshers in that. But that's one thing that we do for preparedness. And then the other piece that sort of the formal thing that we engage and mobilize is our emergency operations center. That's kind of the command center, if you will, for all these activities. So it's where our briefings happen. And in our case, it's just at City Hall. We open a conference room. We have an emergency generator there to ensure that our infrastructure can get back up to the extent possible. The county also has an emergency operations center. The county opened theirs shortly after we opened ours on Saturday. But we all have some level of training, and everyone has a role to play within the emergency operations center. Finance obviously is going to play a finance role. Our city attorney is our public information officer. Our police and fire chiefs have their responsibilities within their scope of work, DPW, et cetera. And my role is to open, convene, and to chair and facilitate the conversation. Say, okay, what do we need over here? Making sure that everyone is providing updates, and then everyone has sort of their understanding of what their plan of attack is. That they have their role to play, and making sure everyone is contributing in that regard. And so I think the city has opened their EOC before. We've opened it during flooding events. We've opened it in my time during flooding events. In past windstorms now. But as you said, unless you have any prior training or have the intuition to say, okay, I need to get staff together. I mean, my house was last priority as far as I was concerned, because we had a city that had potentially some major health and safety issues. And, until you get in and understand what are the reports back, what's the power outage quantity, what's the amount of streets that are closed, immediate property damage, it's remarkable to me that there weren't, during the storm or shortly thereafter, there weren't any significant injuries or fatalities. And I think that our warning systems obviously are intended to provide more of a notification so folks can take shelter. I think thankfully the smartphone is enabling a lot more people to get access to information quicker in those types of events. But it was a Saturday morning. People were at the farmer's market. I mean, we had heard that there might have been some situations at the farmer's market. Obviously, their tents were blown away and such. People were biking. I just ran into countless stories, and I keep reminding myself, I'm just amazed that these folks never sustained any major injuries.
Yes, and I think the perspective goes a long way right now. And certainly our hearts and we're thinking of anybody who's, either still without power or without a home. There's a lot of work still to be done, even with the power coming back for so many people and everything. But with that, you have to also, I think, take this fact that, like you said, there were no fatalities. Certainly, our thoughts are with the family of the lineman who was hurt. Cleanup and everything. Thankfully, and I'm sure that him and his family would say the same thing here. There weren't more of that. We were just talking about this before we went on air. You can definitely tell that there was a storm if you drive through the neighborhoods here. But even with that being said, it's been, 2 weeks? And how much things have progressed since then, that's something to be said for that, too.
Yes.
So that's keeping that grain of salt with you throughout this process is important for all of us, because there's a lot of work still to be done.
I would agree.
And something that I wanted to touch on real quick, in your position, how difficult is it, and how do you balance your heart with the job that needs to be done? I know for me, just coming on the air and talking about, Monday, coming in and giving updates on stuff. And while I'm talking about that, I have flashes in my head of a house near my parents' house that had a tree go through it and a family that's displaced. Things like that going through my head. And my heart is just pulling for those people. My empathy is just in overdrive. But we have a job to do. So, you go out in there, you give the stats, you give all the information as clear as you can. You're on a whole different level when it comes to that, and getting to know you a little bit and everything. You've got a heart. You're a caring person, and these are your citizens. These are your people. These are people that voted for you and everything. So how do you balance that? That with the fact that, okay, my heart goes out with these people, but I got to get this done. The best thing I can do for them is to do my job.
Well, I think it's equal parts compassion as it is calmness. I think, when I was talking with staff and remembered who was in town that day and who wasn't, it was like, okay, who's next, right? And just keeping calm. And I think one thing that strikes me or has struck me through this whole process is individuals' perspectives on what's a priority for them. Not having power is very different than, say, not having running water or not having a roof over someone's head if they can't stay home. So I think it's been very trying for me at times when folks are a bit frustrated with the process of getting power back.
Sure.
And frankly, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I don't know the grid. I know enough about it. I know how power works, all those types of things. But that process was very trying for a lot of individuals. And thankfully, on Sunday morning, we were back up. All of our customers were back online. There were a lot of lingering challenges based upon where maybe poles were located in people's backyards, or that they couldn't get into certain places, or just all these strange complexities with the electrical system. Not that it's broken or it's not constructed correctly. It's just when you have
a complex
literally
system.
decimation of the system, when you have 100 power poles go down and the transformers that are connected to them. I mean, we can't say enough for the 45 municipalities and utilities that sent crews to our city for a week. I mean, these places have now had their labor a little reduction in their force because they were able to come and respond to our call for mutual aid. So I really commend not only our linemen here at the city's utility, but also the utilities that were able to send forces from around the state. And we had over 100 linemen work in the system the entire time. And they selflessly, embraced our community and said, we're willing to help your friends and your neighbors. And I think that motivates me, I think, to continue to realize that we're going to get through this. It's going to be some time. Sometimes we all have to have some more patience. And frankly, when power was out, I saw more people meeting their neighbors and walking the streets and helping each other with cleanup than if we all had power and we had TV and our phones and everything else. So I think it was a great lesson. And, sometimes the simplest things in our communities go a long way than having all the niceties that we'd love to use every day.
Well said. I was speaking with Mayor Zach Vruwink right now and talking certainly about the storm and the update here. We can take a phone call real quick and see what they have to say. Good morning. You're on the air with Mayor Zach Vruwink. What do you have to say? Good morning.
Yes. I was, once the dust has settled with everything, I know some power companies have been gradually putting lines underground. Is this something that now with this sort of thing happening, it might push Water and Light to consider this?
It's a great question.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's definitely motivating, I think, for them because, reliability is a measure that everyone is concerned about, right? When you have lesser reliability, that's scored. Everyone that data is or that information is available. I can say that Water and Light has already embarked on an underground initiative. Many of the new street reconstruction projects in the city receive underground utilities following that. It's very expensive to go underground, so we won't minimize that. It's still far cheaper to have poles above ground. But I think so. I think in those areas where they discovered it was really challenging to restore power based upon where the lines are running in parts of the city in particular, it'll be a motivator to go underground.
And I also, and I know you can add to this as you will. I think that it's also important to remember that this is a freak occurrence. Maybe that's not the most eloquent way to put it, but it really is. I mean, every year we get hit by snow, and every year we all know what it's like. It looks like we're going to wrap up winter, and then all of a sudden we get hit by one more, thing. And so that we kind of are used to. We're consistent with that. There are certain weather things that we're used to dealing with. Even flooding, in some ways, we're starting to get more and more accustomed to. But something like this doesn't happen every summer, every winter, or every spring. It sounds good, and I have read a lot about putting electrics underground and that kind of thing. That is an incredibly expensive production, and something that cannot be underplayed as far as quite frankly, when we're looking at the city, and we have the city putting a lot of money into a lot of other resources right now. Something like that, a project like that, I don't know if it is priority-wise, that's a whole other story, but even doable necessarily right now when we've got so much on our plate already.
And it's also a function of rates versus competitiveness.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to bring up.
I think the utility, the commission really does a pretty good job of balancing that. They want to make sure that we're in the middle of the pack when we compare ourselves to other like municipal electric utilities. Not to say that maybe many of our after going through that event, there's a likelihood that folks will pay a little bit more to have their utilities served underground. As somebody that didn't get power until last Thursday, I knew there were a lot more after me and certainly a lot before me. Having underground sounds pretty attractive. Right, in the grand scheme of things, to your point, I think the only concern I think I have environmentally long-term is these sort of this is a macro burst storm, 91 miles an hour were clocked in the wind speed here in the city. I mean, it was just unprecedented, as you said, and I think once in a century, hopefully, right, we don't have this again, but I am concerned. The likelihood of these types of storm events, the frequency, the severity, they pack a punch, and I think as we're seeing just with insurance reports and to the propensity of these storms is just, it's crazy. I mean, the river level over a very narrow period of time, I haven't seen the river level come up that instantly in the center of the city. Now, I don't know if it's something to do with the dam operators to the south of us or what, but it's those types of events that our infrastructure is just not prepared to deal with. And so whether people want to contribute it to an actual climate change situation, we just have all of the science tells us we've got these storms that are packing a punch, and they come out of nowhere. They're isolated, and we're just going to have to continue to deal with them. Yeah.
We have time to take one more call here for the mayor. Let's go ahead and take that. Good morning.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. So when Doug Mahan, the county board chair, was on, he said that the labor cost is $200,000 a day for bringing these power guys in here. Does the Water and Light have insurance to cover this, or how is that going to be paid for?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
we're all still asking that question. Yes, the number that was cited, these lineman crews were well over $200,000 a day while they're working between their equipment costs. It's the call for mutual aid. That I don't have a direct answer for because we're still waiting on a disaster determination by state and federal resources. And we're trying to do our best to track costs. We've got all of our city crews are literally working on storm cleanup this week. That's all they're doing. Huge costs attributed to that labor and that equipment use, and we're already in the millions as of the city's tally for costs, not to mention the Water and Light costs. So we're optimistic that there will be some disaster relief funds that'll come our way. We don't budget for this. Fortunately, we carry reserves because it's sort of a rainy day situation, but I certainly hope that, the state and federal government will have some resources. I know the county's working to ensure that all the costs at the county level of the municipalities within the county are captured. And I've seen that number well over the millions. So, but from an insurance standpoint, the electrical system, I don't believe can be insured to a point. Now, it is property of the utility, so there might be some coverage, but they'll be subject to major limitations.
Yeah.
And this event would have exceeded all the limitations of coverage.
And there's only so much insurance covers. Right. There's only so many scenarios that it does. And as we've been mentioning, this is one of those scenarios that is not an everyday kind of thing.
Exactly.
It doesn't happen very often. Mayor, we've got a couple minutes left here.
Yeah.
Was there any information that you wanted to get out there before we let you go and get you back to your busy day?
Sure. I know a lot of folks are asking, when are we going to come around and pick up their brush? And we'll pick it up. It's going to be some time. We're going to crank, like I mentioned, all week this week as we pause with all of our construction project. We have a lull in our schedule, so we decided to use that time to do this type of activity. So brush pickup will occur. It's got to be at the curb. We're not going to pick up full trees, so if people have trees down, that's their property and their responsibility to deal with that. We don't have a schedule of when we're going to make it through the entire city. It's very likely this could last weeks into months, and I'd strongly encourage folks that have the means to be able to carry or haul their brush to the compost sites to do that. We're concerned it's going to become a nuisance issue if we can't get to it in time, and you've got long grass growing up, you've got all of the call for all the nuisance, the rodents, whatever else, to animals and things to hole up in those places. So that's the one recommendation or request we have. And I guess just as parting information, we talked about what our emergency response is, what's our structure, what's my role. We're going to be having what's called a hot wash, and we're going to be meeting with city staff this afternoon now that the dust is sort of settled, and then very soon after with the county as a group to talk about our response and what we can do better. If there's things that the residents have on their mind that I should know about or considerations, perspectives are very different, I'm sure, that everyone has, but I'd welcome the input. If someone has some pointed commentary or remarks about how we were able to execute on things, send it our way. Moving faster is not going to be necessarily constructive feedback. We all want to move faster, but there are constraints with labor resources, with equipment resources, and literally just how widespread this storm was. There wasn't a part of town that didn't have experience any major damage, and so unprecedented from that standpoint. But we certainly thank all of our crews for all their efforts, and then everyone else that supported crews in one way or another. And the crews that came from out of the area. We're going to be putting an online thank you card out there for folks to fill out, so encourage people to watch for that too.
One of the things we were talking about earlier is the beauty of that we didn't have any fatalities, that there weren't more serious injuries than those numbers and everything. We don't have that to talk about if people are rushing, if people are hurrying too fast or doing, trying to cut corners or anything like that. The reason we haven't heard any of that is because these linemen know what they're doing. They're professionals, and they've taken that in consideration, not only for themselves, but citizens. And that's something else that I think it deserves a note. I know we've had a story or two here and there, but most citizens have let them do their job, have not tried to, I could get that down, and and then that turns into a whole cartoon scenario. We luckily haven't had a lot of those stories, so I think there's that too. And the way so many businesses and so many people have embraced the people who have come into our area and kind of offered free meals or that sort of thing. The Rafters did something. The whole community from up to down really coming together. Yeah,
it was definitely a show of support and force. It makes me proud to be from this place. It really does.
That's the word I wanted to end on, is proud. Because I know that I felt that, and I can hear it in so many citizens around. And I right away when you came in today, I saw it in you. Yeah, and that's got to feel good.
That's how we carry ourselves, right? We can't get mopey and got to keep our head held high.
It's work to be done. Yeah. So absolutely. And again, Mayor, I really appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, James.
We'll speak again soon. And that we are speaking again with Mayor Zach Vruwink, having a storm update for us. And we'll talk with him again real soon. Coming up in part 2 of Morning Magazine, we have Stephanie and Donna coming in, where we'll be speaking about the Wisconsin Vesta Dog fundraiser coming up on Morning Magazine on AM 1320